And the first thing I love about this gun is that it's a high power. It's John Moses Browning's last design. Really, he didn't finish it. One of his proteges did, but he started this process. And a lot of people say it was his last design. And because of that, it has a lot of history. It's known around the world as the P-35. It has been the military sidearm of many, many countries, both enemies and friends of the United States. And it's my understanding that these are still used in some militaries around the world. And you guys know I geek out when it comes to the history and mechanics of guns. So it's just really cool that this gun has that military provenance. I know it's not as loved and adored as a 1911, but still there are many people that find the Browning high power to be a superior firearm, even compared to many guns that are made today. And like all John Moses Browning designs, when you hold one of these, it just feels very natural in your hand. I kind of feel like mini guns today, the grip angle is an afterthought. They design the gun and they're like, okay, let's make this thing ergonomic. When you hold a high power, it's like holding a 1911. Yeah, the grip profiles are a little bit different. They just feel very natural in your hand. And I kind of feel like John Browning designed them that way. He said, how can I make this gun feel comfortable, and then I'm going to make it effective. I don't know if that's actually the process he went through, but all of his guns really always do feel very comfortable in your hand. From the grip angle to the width of the frame, it's just a naturally shooting pistol because of that grip design, and I really like that. Another thing that this model offers that I do like is it has the older and more traditional style of hammer. I have a couple of Browning high powers myself that are a lot more modern, and they have the more spur type. This one is the, I guess they call it the combat or the commander style, that is rounded with that hole. And I've always liked this because that's what I see on many of the originals from the 1930s and the 1940s. So I've always liked that. And I've always heard too that these will give you less hammer bite. But we're going to talk about that when it comes to the things that I don't like about this pistol. I'm also a big fan of this finish. It's not a blued finish, like I said, but it's an epoxy finish that seems to be rather durable. I do like the two-tone look, that black slide, that silver frame. Yeah, that's really nice. And then, of course, there are the grips and the grip panels. Now, it is my understanding, and Richard told me, these are not the original grips that came on this gun. The originals were a wraparound with finger grooves, and I'm not a big fan of those either. But these grips, he said, are discontinued from Uncle Mike's, and I guess they were a popular option back in the 1990s. But if you owned one of the practical models with those wraparound grips and you don't like those finger grooves, well, go to my sponsor, Brownworks. I'm telling you, he'll make awesome grips just as nice as these. But I always review the guns as they are given to me to review, and these come with these really nice Uncle Mike's grips. They're standard profile. They feel really good in my hand. They're kind of made of a hard rubber, so I do like that a lot. The last thing that I think that they improved for the civilian market was the sights. Now remember, this gun was made in the late 80s and early 90s, but instead of having a little tiny blade sight, they actually have a ramped front sight. Now you don't have adjustable sights in the rear, but I feel like this ramp sight in the front is designed for more accurate shooting. And we're going to talk about the trigger too, and whether I like it or not. I'd actually put that more in the neutral category, but this trigger is a little bit different as well. But it's not one of those things that I want to say I really like. I'm not going to mention it here. But the sights and the trigger are two things that they did that I think to upgrade this pistol over the standard model. So now let's talk about a couple things that I don't like. And the first thing I don't like is the same complaint I pretty much have on every high power, and that is every single one of the originals gives me hammer bite. And let me show you why. I kind of have meaty hands, maybe a little bit fatty hands, and as you can see, when I ride this gun kind of high, which is the traditional modern way of doing things, you can already see that that fleshy part around my thumb is kind of going over that beaver tail. And so when this hammer comes back, yeah, it's gonna pinch. And I have to be really careful. So what I have to do is hold this gun down on the grip a little bit more. It does not feel as natural to me. And I like to be able to hold my guns high on the grip to get that bore axis as low as possible. It's my understanding in the new high powers that FN is making, they have extended that and they've changed the design of the hammer to prevent that hammer bite. Now, I know a lot of people that don't have any issue with this. I think it's honestly just my hand. But if you have kind of fleshy hands like I do, you might experience hammer bite on a lot of high powers, and that's something that I experience, and it's one of the downsides to most high powers for me and why I don't own more. And the other thing about this gun that I don't like is the same thing I complain about pretty much every other high power, and that is the magazines don't drop free. Yeah, they didn't want them to. You have to strip these out. It's just the way the Europeans like them. I know here in the United States, we like it when we push that magazine button and that magazine just flies out of there. So that can make reloading a little bit more of a chore. I just like the more modern ways of doing things, but I understand that a lot of people don't have any issues with that. As I said, these have been adopted by militaries and police departments. They haven't had an issue with it as long as you train that way. I just like to be able to push that mag button and have that magazine drop clear, free of that gun, because that's one less thing I have to do when reloading. So those are the things here on the table that I like and don't like. So let's get this thing to the range. Let's just see how it shoots. And does it shoot any better than a standard high power? So as always, I'm going to start with a target at 7 yards, load up one of these magazines, and I'm going to take a few shots at this target, see if I experience any malfunctions, what my initial impressions are, if I discover anything about the gun that I like or don't like that I didn't figure out here on the table, and just get my initial impressions. So let's get to the range. Here we go. And I've shot quite a few high powers in my time, and I have to say this one honestly stands out. The action of this one is silky smooth, and the recoil impulse is a lot less than many other high powers I've held. You know, when you shoot these and compare them to, let's say, a Beretta 92 or a Glock 17, these aren't unmanageable, but you go, yeah, they're a little bit more snappy. I think it has to do with the recoil spring and the hammer spring and them being a little bit more stout. And there's many companies today that offer aftermarket ones that can adjust that. But this one coming just from the factory like this, it's really smooth. It feels great in my hand. As I said, these are natural pointing guns just because of the grip angle and how they feel in my hand. I've always liked them. Just wish that beaver tail was a little bit longer, but I'm really impressed with this, and I seem to shoot it pretty darn accurate, so I'm impressed with it, and that's my first impressions so far. All right, so now I'm going to double the distance of this target. I'm going to go for the head on this IDPA silhouette, make sure the accuracy continues, and see if I discover anything else about this pistol that I like or don't like. And this gun is continuing to be a naturally shooting pistol for me. I just have to be very aware of that hammer bite. I was shooting it in that, I had to adjust my hand down. I realized, uh-oh, I'm starting to ride it a little bit high. But luckily, it didn't pinch me. I just became a little bit aware of it. But so far, this high power is shooting like a dream. It's probably the nicest high power I've ever shot. All right, so now the next test I want to do is the bench rest test. So far, this thing has been really accurate, so I'm expecting good results. And after this test, I want to talk a little bit more about this trigger and my thoughts about it, and also do a trigger pull gauge with it and see what weight it's actually breaking at. So let me bench rest this, put another magazine through this, and see how it performs. All right, so unfortunately I was not as accurate that time as I was hoping to be, but I want to talk about this trigger because there's some things about this trigger that I really like and a couple things that I don't. The first thing I want to talk about, and of course let me safety check the gun. Now unfortunately I do have to put the magazine in to do this and show you because it still has the magazine safety disconnect, which is one of those things that people are going to say, oh, it ruins the trigger pull of those guns. However, it has been my experience that if they are made right and you have a competent gunsmith, you can keep that disconnect in there and still have a pretty darn good trigger pull. So let me show you this trigger pull here. So we have quite a bit of take-up. It's not too bad, but you do hit a wall, and it's a pretty darn clean break. Then let me reset it. And here is the first thing about this trigger that I don't like.
โม้เก่งคุณเคยเล่นไหมที่เรียกว่า 2025 ยุคการเซิร์ฟเวอร์โหดมีเงินก็ชาร์จไม่ได้เศรษฐีมาก็ต้องลงตะเกียนฟาร์มมอนสเตอร์ตอนนี้จะสอนวิธีสร้างตัวละครให้เร็วผู้เล่นใหม่ออนไลน์แต่แต้มสำนักเสียงโปอัพถึงเลเวล10รับฟรีหนังสือสกิลมือเดียวบังฟ้าจากนั้นลงตะเกียนฟาร์มมอนสเตอร์เลยฟาร์มมอนสเตอร์ยิ่งเยอะสกิลยิ่งโหดโดยทั่วไปใช้เวลาไม่ถึงครึ่งชั่วโมงสกิลมือเดียวบังฟ้าสามารถอัพถึงเลเวลแม็กซ์ได้ตอนนี้ฟาร์มมอนสเตอร์ก็ทันแตงโมตัดพักอัตราดอกไอเทมสูงมากความเร็วในการหาของเมื่อเลเวลเต็มแซงหน้าเศรษฐีได้เลยนี่น้องที่สนใจยุคการเวอร์
片期待每一条消息，迷人的风景，那是你。